Hello and welcome to our Sustaining Healthy Relationships podcasts. In March 2022, Relate NI commissioned Ulster University to carry out evidence-based research on healthy relationships and their importance across our lifespans. These podcasts delve a little deeper into our findings and we bring them to life with experts unpacking particular findings. Enjoy. Liz Davis, thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest on our podcast. Can you tell me a wee bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes. So I've been working kind of within the community sector now for over 30 years. When I say that out loud, it gives me a woo. So I started off kind of in childcare. That's where my journey began, with 16. Left school, didn't particularly like school, left it, and then just went into the field of childcare, became a nursery nurse, and from that then I had my own children and then began working within the communities as a playgroup leader. And from that then, it was from there that I was really intrigued by family work and working with families and the connections and relationships. I would have had a lot of parents came to me, with some of the issues that they face with their children, and some of the issues going on at home, even within relationships. So from that then I thought, I want to do more of this, and then a job came up within Sure Start and I thought I really want that. It was family support work, and given that I'd had my own life experiences, as a young mum, I was only 22 when I became a mother myself and had my own home, and I'd went through a wee bit of postpartum, and I just felt I had a lot to give kind of within that. So I developed into family support work within Sure Start. And then from that, with quickly building up relationships, going into people's houses, I would have sat back and thought, I'd love a wee bit of further training here to make sure that I'm responding to these parents properly, because a lot of the disclosures were quite traumatic, and with a lot of abuse connected to it. So I decided then to go on to do a counselling course, and from that then I thought, I'm really enjoying this, and obviously a lot of self-reflection in that as well. And then I went on and then trained to become a full-time counsellor, or not a full-time counsellor, but a counsellor on top of then the other job that I was doing. So I was with Sure Start then for 18 years. I turned 18 and left the family home, where I was then the perinatal worker, working a lot with antenatal parents and that, parents within the first few months of after having their babies. And the work that I do now is with the parent rooms. So with the parent rooms, I was doing a wee bit of training for them, and then did some freelance, and then ended up going on to be their parent advocate / counsellor. And it's for all parents. That organisation's for all parents of children of all ages. But we would get a lot of women in that perinatal period. So that's a wee bit of my journey to where I've came to now. And as I said, I'm a mum of two. My boys are now, even when I say that out loud, 26, and the other one's coming 25. And the years just flying, so. And even thinking about relationships with them as well, when they became into young adults. So I take that life experience and bring it into my job as well. So I'm very passionate about my work within the community sector, and I think I'll probably be in that sector really until I decide to retire.
Which will be a long time yet. So I want to take you back to when I started my job here. I was tasked with designing and developing sustaining healthy relationship workshops. So I did some research. I went to see Sure Start in South Belfast. You and I knew each other, but my first piloting of that workshop was with you in South Belfast. I think it was in June evening maybe, and you were really, really supportive. So we had designed some materials around the Gottman Institute Sound Relationship House, how we communicate effectively, the issues and difficulties parents can expect when this baby comes. We have this idea that this baby's going to come and everything's going to be gorgeous, this white picket fences, and it's going to be this happy family. And it's about really preparing parents, I suppose, for the sometimes difficult journey that we can go through. You know, it's all ups and downs, if you like. Can you talk a wee bit about how you felt that, you know, that workshop set? You give me really good feedback. You give me the foot in the door, and then we got the feedback from yourselves and from the parents to say, this is brilliant, we want more of this. This sits so well within the Sure Start antenatal programme for preparing parents to become parents, and all the joys, the trials and tribulations that brings.
I was actually delighted when it was proposed to me, because what I was identifying for a long time, really, as you'd said, it's the challenges parent can bring, because when we go to our antenatal appointments, it's all on, you know, looking at how you're doing, is the baby growing, all stuff like that, and we learn, you know, about the birthing experience. But the reality is, you know, with this little human being coming in, and it's like this wee explosion when this wee baby comes along, and it can be so joyous, but on the other side of that, you know, people don't talk about, you know, the relationship difficulties that can come with that, and being really emotionally prepared for that wee baby coming along. So what I was identifying was a lot of the parents that were coming into the programmes, in particular if I was identifying some low mood, they would have all had the same theme, you know, around relationship difficulties, and, you know, that maybe they had different expectations of parenting, and some of those conversations weren't had before the baby came along. And then on top of that, we have our own ghosts from our nursery come through. So we have, if you think even of the intergenerational trauma, and all that other family stuff comes through, whether it's conscious or unconscious, from the past, and that can also then bring problems when that's not explored too. So a lot of the time, there was low mood, but it was because there was strain in the relationships too. So I was thinking, you know, I would love to really identify this before baby comes along. So when you came along with sustaining healthy relationships, I just thought it would have fitted perfect into our programme, and it did, because it opened up those conversations to start thinking about, what is life going to look like when this little baby comes along? Instead of, you know, the way sometimes we can get caught up in this bubble, and it's going to be so perfect, and we're not going to be shouting like our parents did. We're not going to be arguing, and so.
You are doing, so you do like support, advocacy and counselling. What are you seeing kind of presenting as issues for either antenatal parents, you mentioned low mood, or people who've just had new babies?
It's that transitioning period can be difficult. Nothing prepares you for those sleepless nights, the sleep deprivation that comes along with that. And then if there has been any wee cracks within the relationship, sometimes people think a baby's going to fix a relationship, when really those cracks can grow bigger. So a lot of the time it's the mental load. And in particular, whilst everybody has a mental load, but in particular a woman's mental load, so that would present a lot within sessions of having to do everything, looking after the baby, having to think, planning kind of what meals and everything we're having, and maybe partners not being aware of even them and asking to write down a list, or you should have told me, adds on to that mental load, and then resentment can grow. And then we all know when a baby comes along, the intimacy is non-existent as well, especially if you've got that little baby co-sleeping or having you up half the night. So then,
and the relationship with your body and your hormones, and the no time, that intimacy that you could have at any time that you wanted, and then this baby comes and then there's no time for this intimacy.
And you're right, because the body changes, the shaping of the body, and then self-confidence around that. So when you're putting all that into the mix, you know, the relationship can get more strained and more distance, and then the stonewalling comes in, or where they just don't talk about it. So that's what a lot of the issues would be presented with now. And also along, I have to not leave out, there's a lot of birth trauma.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask you about that,
So even if women have had a really great pregnancy and everything has been going so far to plan, you know, if something changes within that birthing, that can have a huge impact. Or even that the birth has went okay, it may be that the woman hasn't felt heard, or there's been somebody has said something not in a very good way, and I don't think people realise the lasting impact that can have as well. And then with the whole COVID, and a lot of women were very isolated. When you're going through your pregnancy, you want to show off your bump and speak to other women about it, but that was all cut off. So what we see as a presentation now is post-COVID as well, those women that were maybe isolated. And I don't want to just keep saying women, because daddies, were isolated too, being able to, maybe go to actual face-to-face classes. So.
Yeah. And birth trauma for the husbands or the partners as well, in terms of going, I've just seen what my partner's gone through. I never want to put my hand on her again, because that was just completely horrendous.
Yeah.
So I think the birth trauma can impact on both partners differently.
Yeah,
but
it can impact, and it could be that the woman has felt that the birth has went great, but the partner is so traumatised from their experience, even going into labour. That can be very frightening as well. I actually remember a dad had done a podcast, and I had to go on to that, and his story had me in tears of laughter, but also tears of the experience that went through. And it was actually lovely to hear him talking about, his language was a bit blue and but absolutely hilarious, but talking about describing, if even when the baby was coming. And one of the things he kept saying was, remember, Liz told us this is a really good sign, so when this is going to happen. But yeah, dads, I think sometimes there's not enough space for dads to come and talk, because a lot of the programmes that you do run tends to be mums come along, and we love seeing dads coming in and taking part, to the point I would love to really start up like a dad's peer support in some way. But I think it's harder for men to come along and talk about what's going on for them, in particular if there's feelings of being left out or jealousy. How can somebody admit that there's a wee bit of jealousy to this wee tiny baby that they absolutely love? Yeah. And it's to normalise some of those feelings, and that's what I help people do, to normalise some of the feelings. And actually the learning I even got from sustaining healthy relationships, I use some of that information now to help normalise to people. Relationships do struggle a wee bit because there's a lot of changes going on, but the important thing is keeping communication open. It's key, and it's key beforehand as well.
It was really interesting because Kevin Duggan, we had a conversation with Kevin Duggan from Sure Start about how do we get dads more involved. So, I mean, it's really difficult. I think lots of your groups actually had dads, but your group was in the evening. So dads, of course, are out to work, or, they're back to work or after paternity leave or whatever. And he was saying, how do we get dads to talk about relationships? And I said, just don't call it relationships. Call it something else, because there is that, there's a stigma. I think there's a stigma about talking about relationships in general, but I think for men to open up, even to say, well, actually, I'm a bit jealous that this new baby is taking up all our time and all our space when it used to be just the two of us. And that's, I can only imagine it's a really hard thing to admit. Yeah.
And even also too around, dads, roles are really changing for dads. There's a lot of stay-at-home dads now. Dads are maybe taking up in that longer paternity leave, where mums maybe return to work early. And there's all those mixed messages for dads as well, because whilst, a lot of time they're being told to maybe step back, this is about the woman and the birth, but however still be more hands-on. So they're a bit confused as to what they're meant to be doing, and maybe not given the chance for their confidence to grow, because a lot of the time too, one of the other presenting things is letting go of the control. And it's not that the woman's purposely wanting control, it's about, we have our way of doing things. You're knowing how to sterilise the bottles or feeding the baby, and you do it in a particular way. But daddies are going to do it in a different way too. Like, everybody's unique and individual and has their own ways of doing things. So it's letting go of a wee bit of that and saying it's okay if dad takes up that position to do it his way.
Yeah. I was teaching one of the classes over in West Belfast, and one of the young women, it was her second pregnancy, so she'd had her first baby, and she was very hands-on, and she was trying to build his confidence in terms of, no, you put the baby down tonight and blah blah blah. So she's all like, right, you put the baby down tonight. And then the baby woke up 2 hours later screaming because he'd forgotten to put a nappy on. And so that completely knocked his confidence then, in terms of going, you see, you let me do this and then I forget to put the nappy on, and and this is a whole, and so she's trying to kind of build his confidence, then also kind of soothe him and saying, look, the baby's just wet, it's not the end of the world. But so it's really, it's difficult to kind of get that balance in terms of the letting go of the control, going, I know exactly what this baby needs, but also my partner needs to have a role in this relationship.
Yeah. And dads play such a huge important role in the relationships, even for helping mum and baby separate, creating that triangle of letting them, because I know it's stereotypical to think, but dads, there is a bit more rougher play, and that's okay. Women tend to wrap the babies up and don't be throwing them up like that, where they love it, so they need that mix of both. I know you were saying there about the programmes we did have dads coming along. It was one of the good things we did have within Sure Start, the uptake, especially in the antenatal. We had dads coming along to hypnobirthing, dads coming along then to the real birth, and then another one called Womb to World. So we would have had a really good uptake in that, because it was important that the birthing partner was going to be there to hear and understand what their role, and a really important role within the birth, and also in supporting and being the woman's advocate and speaking up for her. And then sometimes we would have got more dads coming to the likes of swimming, the baby swim, which was great to allow that relationship to develop between dad and baby as well.
So, Liz, when I started doing this work, I was aware that, there's a set of skills that you can learn for healthy relationships, like learning to drive or learning to cook or learning a new language. But if you were brought up in a home where healthy relationships were not modelled, we end up repeating that behaviour. I'm sure you've come across it in your work where people think, everything's fine, then this baby's dropped in like just a hand grenade, and then all that stuff comes up, so you have the emotion of having a new baby, and then you have the emotion of dealing with all the stuff that's going on for you. What does that look like when it presents?
Yeah, you can see relationships become very strained. In my line of work, we would have seen a lot of intergenerational trauma, and maybe working within areas of high deprivation. And what I'd said earlier on about those ghosts from the past do come up, and especially if, there maybe has been signs of like domestic violence, that can raise its head as well through the pregnancy and then once the baby comes along. And for those families that haven't came up in healthy relationships and brought up in that way, it's just the norm. That was okay for mum and dad to shout in the house, because there was that old saying, babies, they don't know they're only wee tiny babies, but they really do. Babies have the same feelings and emotions as we do, but they just can't vocalise it. It's all held somatically in their body, and it's helping parents to understand that this little baby is a wee human being with all those feelings and needs that nice, secure, warm environment to be able to grow and nurture. So some of the programmes that we were putting in were to try to stop that cycle of happening again, of maybe people having poor parenting skills or doing just what their mum or their granny did, because we had to be delicate with it too, because sometimes maybe grandparents would have been coming in and saying, well, I used to do that and it didn't do me no harm. So you were having to have a lot of diplomacy there too. But that's why within Sure Start we did parenting programmes. There was the likes of the Solihull programme, and everybody within the team was trained within Solihull, and that was something that they were trying to promote throughout the organisation, through down to the parents. But we would also had Enjoy Your Baby, and it was a low CBT programme to be able to
That's cognitive behavioural therapy.
Yeah, cognitive behaviour. So it was low to, and a lot to enjoy your baby, but it was for mums with low mood to help identify that and to put some self-care in. And then that's why we also really wanted to get parents at the antenatal period, and in particular young parents as well. We were delighted when we had young parents. Actually, a couple of the ones you had, and actually one of the case study I did was on a young couple as well. So it was great having them in, not just to talk about what was going to be happening, you know, with the changes in the body and what was going to happen at the birth, but to start those conversations around relationships and looking at the changes that could happen in that fourth trimester and making it as real as we could without scaring people.
Yeah.
So even looking at what postpartum looks like and giving signs of that and what to do, and also making men aware that 1 in 10 men also experience it. So, you know, to keep the lines of communication open.
I know I was always really careful about when we, you know, did the research slide about, you know, 60 or 70% of parents will, you know, there'll be parental conflict, but 37% of parents end up actually splitting up. And it's like, we're not trying to scare you. We just want to let you know that this, you know, this is a possibility. This is not a sticking plaster. You mentioned the case study. Talk me through the case study. Tell us a wee bit about the case study that you wrote up for our policy paper.
Yeah, well, that was a young couple that had came to us at the beginning of their journey, actually. They were quite isolated, with family not living in Northern Ireland, and were quite young at university. We're still trying to find a suitable place to live, and had quite a lot of financial difficulties. So had came first. Had heard about it at the hospital, so that's how referrals would have came in. It would have been like a tick box if they wanted to be referred to Sure Start and they were in the area. And this wee family then started off with the Bonding with Bump. And the Bonding with Bump was really what it says to do. It was a 4-week programme just to give parents a space. Well, it was only the woman came along to that one around about the earlier stages after they'd had the big scan. And that was really to get them to start to think about the baby. And this little baby developing inside and what they could do, you know, to form that attachment with them. So we would have looked at things like the senses developing and at what stage the baby can hear and you know, around the movement, and we games that they could play with their bump to do that. And we also looked at a thing which I did in antenatal with later on in the real birth as well. So we did this activity, and it's with a tree, and it was starting to get them to think about looking at this tree, the roots being where they've came from, their values, their beliefs, their parents, their grandparents, all that kind of stuff, and starting to have that conversation with their partner around what they want for this wee baby. So the trunk would have been looking at who they are actually as a person, the things that they like to do. So for instance, you know, I love my festivals, I love dancing, I love going out and meeting friends, but I'm also a mom, a sister, a daughter, you know, that. Then the branches would be what supports they have around them. So if there was limited supports, to start thinking about, right, what is in your area that you can access, and then the fruits or the flowers, whatever they wanted to grow, were the gifts that they wanted their child to have. So, you know, it was great because when we did this with couples, we actually got them to say something of each other, and one would have maybe said that I want them to be like mum or dad, how calm they are, and how they can solve problems, you know, just talking it through. Or I want them to be empathic, I want them to be artistic, you know, and starting to think about what it is they need to do as parents to really grow and nurture that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a really, really lovely activity to do, and it really gets them to open up conversation. And parents have went home actually and made it into this lovely design and had it up on their walls and stuff as well. You know, and what would be lovely, you know, if you had this picture up on your wall to say, you know, before you were even born, we were having these conversations. Yeah. You know, so it's that talking.
Yeah. And when the house is a state and the baby has been slept and everything looks like doom and gloom.
Yeah.
Just if we look at the lovely bright picture that we have created, and go back to that as well.
Yeah.
You mentioned two things. You mentioned poverty. You've mentioned poverty twice, and you've mentioned socioeconomic deprivation. What is the impact on poverty on early years and families struggling? How does that present in terms of relationships?
Poor mental health, because the constant strain of that financial pressure, and especially as we know, when children come along, they're not cheap. They're very expensive, and even trying to get all the equipment that you need for the baby. So we would have provided a lot of support, whether with referral partners, whether we referred to the hub to try to get financial support, or through thing with Save the Children we used to reach out to, which was building blocks, which again, in the case study I had mentioned that we were able to access for this little family, and you can, from that you can get baby equipment, you can get vouchers, and it's getting them off to a good start. If you have a cot, or they're able to get a Moses basket or other baby items that they needed, and then also finding out other organisations that could maybe donate nappies and baby items, but the pressure that puts on, and especially with all the different types of families that we have now, and a lot of families that were particularly living in the South Belfast area, there was a lot of families didn't have family support.
Yeah.
So it's not
quite a transient area with the university.
Yeah, it's quite a transient. That's the word. Yeah. So we would have seen a lot of pressure, and then that applies a lot of pressure on the parents, especially if we have two parents that aren't working, and some of the state of the housing within some of the areas in South Belfast isn't great either. A lot of families are living in houses where the damp is absolutely ridiculous, and maybe struggling to get their landlords to do anything about it. Yeah. And even right down to having to support a lot of families through food banks as well, especially with the cost of living. I know we hear this constantly, but the huge impact, I don't know about you, I went to Tesco's the other day and spent £100 and came out with two wee shopping bags, so, and especially with the benefit changes as well, going into the universal credits, and what we're expecting families to live on. Yeah. So there's a huge impact there on mental health.
Which impacts on relationships, which impacts on everything else. So when I was doing this research for the workshops and stuff, I heard a lot of talk about the first 1,000 days of a child's life and how important they are. Can you unpack that a wee bit for us?
Yes. So the research over the last few decades has really shown is that the first few years of a baby's life is critical, and that's including from that antenatal period, because so much research would show now how even babies' development, including their senses, are developing from even, from as early as 8 weeks old. And then when that little baby's born, it's the first time that wee baby's been held or touched for the first time. So for that period of time within the womb, it's been nurtured and cocooned in this wee safe place, and then it comes out into an environment where all these bright lights and the first being touched, and the wee journey that the baby has made anyhow through the birth. So then we know now that especially that first year of life is the fastest that a baby's brain will grow, and babies are born to relate. Babies are born to seek out human connections, and that's what helps their wee brains to grow. So when babies come out, their wee brains are smooth up to about 14 to 16 weeks, and then their wee brains start crinkling into what we know as, the form of the human brain. Mm-hmm. And even within that period of time, it's something like every time we talk, there's something like over 1 million connections per second, could even be 2 million connections per second going off in that wee baby's brain. So when you think of all the wee sparks every time a mummy smiles or a daddy smiles or they're singing to that baby, and that's what we try to teach the parents, within the parent programs as well, that a baby just needs your face. And I know we can't be there present for a baby 24 hours of the day because there is wee ruptures and repairs happening, that's okay. But to have your attention and you singing to your baby and talking to your baby and reading books to your baby is going to grow baby's brain. And then they move into wee toddlerhood where they're like wee sponges, just absorbing everything. And while it can be the difficult period, as parents reports, the temper tantrums come along and the meltdowns, but that's because they're only these wee human beings with these huge, overwhelming emotions that can't verbalise. So healthy relationships, you know, are really important, you know, from the word go, from these wee babies. If you think of all them connections that are going on for a wee baby that's not getting that and maybe isn't in a healthy, you know, household where relationships, maybe there's a lot of shouting going on, or, you know, mum's mood's low, dad's mood's low, aren't maybe getting those interactions. And when that pruning stage comes, that some of those connections, they'll be washed away and maybe the brain's not fully forming. So we think of kind of, you know, learning delays, maybe speech delays can happen, behavioural problems can happen, or for that wee baby that's maybe having to sit in a very hypervigilant state, if you're thinking from the fight or flight, because we're all born with that primitive brain. And babies from straight away, as I say, we're in that wee nurturing, you know, cocoon within the womb, but when we come out, it's we need our main caregiver to be able to keep us safe and secure. And if that's not there, if maybe parents are, you know, there's a lot of fighting going on, if there's domestic violence, if there's poor mental health, the financial pressures going on, when you put all that together, maybe the birthing experience hasn't been great. So I don't know.
It's really, it's massive, like, it's really, really massive. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to say. So even when you see then, you know, parents now, if I'm working with people, a lot of our defence mechanisms, you know, come from our earlier stages of life and the way that our wee brains have had to wire. So if we've come into a family that, you know, a household that there's been a lot of shouting, or, you know, maybe daddy's hitting mummy or vice versa, that they can't concentrate. They're so having to sit in that fight or flight in that hypervigilant state to be able to learn how to play.
Yeah. I'm going to give you a magic wand, because I think all my podcast guests should have a magic wand. And I'm going to give you a magic wand for wishes in terms of relationships and early years. So here's your magic wand.
The biggest one would be funding. We need the funding to come in for our services, to be able to continue and to be able to grow. Like even thinking of our own wee organisation, we're only a wee grassroots organisation, but there's so much work we could be doing and the need is there, but with the lack of funding and that financial support, we can't continue to grow to be able to provide the services that families much need. And I think the other thing would be, I think it's really important. I know this isn't early years, but within schools, and I think from earlier on, we need to be putting information into our schools about when they are becoming parents, because they're all future parents, and giving them that education. I would love to see, maybe this is a bit out there, but our maternity service is changing as well. I have, over the last few years, there has been a rise in more birth trauma and maybe parents not getting that right support that they need. And I know the pressures are on the NHS as well. So that goes back down to needing the financial support to be coming in there too, because they're feeling the pressures too. And I know they're not probably great wishes. I'm trying to think.
I think they're wonderful wishes. If I had a fiver for every time I delivered a Sustaining Healthy Relationships workshop and somebody went, why are they not teaching this stuff in schools? And I'm like, I know, because we're relational beings. We're in relationships from before we're born till we die. So why not learn the skills and tools to manage those relationships effectively? It should be part and parcel of the curriculum. So I think your wishes are absolutely great. And so we need families to be out of poverty. We need the NHS to be properly funded, and we need organisations like yours to be properly funded as well. And I think those 3 wishes would absolutely have very much help healthy relationships and early years.
Yeah.
Thank you, Liz Davis.
Thank you for having me.
So thanks to my guest, Liz Davis. For further information on relationship support, briefing papers and other podcasts, check out relateni.org. You can also listen to these podcasts from your regular platforms.